Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Villalobos, WiCyS Community Manager, and I would like to welcome you to this Strategic Partner WiCyS webinar with JPMorgan Chase. But before we start, I'd like to introduce you a little bit about the WiCyS organization. We often go by our acronym WiCyS, as in We Sisters, because that's exactly what we are, a global cyber sisterhood. We are a 501c3 with over 8.1 members in 70 countries. WiCyS is a premier organization with global reach dedicated to bring together women in cyber. Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. All of our programs and initiatives are made possible by our supporting strategic partners. We have our professional affiliates, student chapters, equity advocacy committee, mentor-mentee programs, speakers bureau, job board, and so much more. You can view our training and programs and initiatives at our website at WiCyS.org. You can learn more about different ways to get involved beneath the WiCyS community. We all of our wonder initiatives to our strategic partners. Our tier 1 partners being Alchemite, Amazon, Battelle, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineer Institute, Cisco, Fortinet, Google, Lockheed Martin, Meta, Microsoft, Optum, Sandia National Labs, and SentinelOne. Reminder to ask questions throughout the webinar. You can put them in the chat and the presenter will answer them at the end. We have the experts here today and they look forward from hearing from you. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to our WiCyS newsletter at WiCyS.org to stay up to date on any upcoming WiCyS events and trainings. And with us today, we have Cathy Ryan Reneer presenting on the topic, Notes to My Younger Self, Key Learnings from My Career. Cathy, I will hand it over to you and you can take it away.
Thank you very much. So just a little bit more about my journey to date. So I started my career when I was still in high school. I actually started working at a psychiatric hospital where I got to do a little bit of everything. So it was word processing, medical records, scheduling, and then also helping patients. And so immediately I was thrown into dealing very extensively with people. Very different from a lot of other service industries. And so kind of starting from there, I went on to college and I got an internship at IBM. I started with IBM full-time. And I worked at IBM, progressing through my career. I very intentionally started as an assistant there because I wanted to learn how the company worked. I started out as an assistant in the president's office of one of the divisions. And so what I quickly learned was it was important to build a network and to be visible. So that was some really key learnings for me there. I then went on to spend a wonderful career at IBM, and I left IBM in 2016 as a director in identity access management when I then joined JPMorgan Chase. And I would tell you that along that journey, I realized also a few times that it was important for me to go back to school several times, right? So I have a bachelor's degree in management and theater. So I am not afraid of public speaking, which you can probably detect from the webinar today. I then went on and got an MBA several years after I had been in my career. And then I finished off with a master's of cybersecurity. What was really interesting with my degree in cybersecurity is that I had been working as a chief privacy officer and realized that this is an up and coming field that we really didn't have a lot of education and training for at the time. And so I worked with Northeastern University to create a master's in information assurance, which is what we used to call cybersecurity. And I was lucky enough to help build that curriculum and to be in the first graduating class, which was an amazing opportunity and one I am forever grateful for. And it was a part-time, partially virtual at the time. So again, kind of cutting leading edge. And there was a couple of key things that really struck me going through that. And one of them was that since the internet, more laws have been put on the books in the last 10 years than the prior 100. And so it just tells you how much technology can change the landscape. And, you know, it just makes you very wary of where new threats could be coming from all the time. In JPMorgan Chase, I have now been here since 2016. I started in Manhattan, and I was fortunate enough to get relocated to Tampa, Florida. I now run our identity access management operations for the firm. And in addition to that, I am the Tampa Technology Center leader here in Tampa, where we have 1,900 technologists. I'm also very active in our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you'll hear me say this again later. It's very important to give back. I'm on board of directors for the community, and I want to influence and be impactful, not only in my workplace, but in the communities in which I live. So that's a little bit about me. Let me go ahead and start digging in deeper to give you a little bit more about some of the lessons I've learned and what I've really had to teach my younger self. Adversity and challenges shape who we are and what we become. We all will have them and we all will deal with them. And I would tell you one of the very early lessons I learned, I became a first-line manager when I was 27 years old. And everybody needs to be aware of ageism. Ageism can strike you when you're young, it can strike you mid-career, and it can strike you when you're older. And so it's interesting when you're being perceived as the kid, like, what do you know? You couldn't possibly have enough experience. So you have to really figure out, how you have to motivate people. Everybody gets motivated differently because they have unique needs, and they are going to be asking for different things from you. And so as any of you get into a management career, it's really important to understand where each person is coming from. It's very important to take the time to build relationships, to listen and to be non-judgmental. Try to be aware of your own unconscious biases because they could get you to make a bad decision without all the facts or to rush to a decision without really listening to somebody, so they're not really being fully heard. You need to be observant. When you go into a new role, watch everything, be a sponge. Do not try to force changes on organizations and, immediately. You have to be trusted in order to be able to drive and implement change. It's very important. So, don't just try and fix it right out of the gate. You have to build trust with people. Really important, don't burn your bridges. What you will tend to find in any industry, in any company, it gets very small, very fast. It doesn't matter if it's 450,000 people like at IBM, 270, 80,000 people here at JPMorgan Chase. You will circle each other again. So really, really important to strive for win-win solutions. And, it's fine to challenge the status quo, and you should. It's how you do it, which is going to make the difference. So, and you need to find ways to help teams, in your organization get to, yes, here's what we can do instead of saying, no, that won't work. No, that doesn't fit here. No, we didn't do that like that here. So to me, that's really key. My father always told me, can't, never could do anything. So find ways to overcome obstacles. Communicate. Your management team, your peers, your employees, they don't know, what you're doing, what the priority is, unless you spend time communicating and getting them on board with you. You have to be your own cheerleader. You can't just sit back and think, hey, I'm doing a good job. People are gonna recognize me for it. You have to make sure that people understand what you're doing and that, they understand where you're influencing positive change in organizations. That to me is very, very key. Being proactive with recognition, writing a verbal or a written thank you goes a long way with the teams. And you don't get anywhere by yourself, so make sure you bring them along with you. Treat others as you want to be treated. You need to provide support for individuals to go outside their comfort zone. You need to encourage their continuous learning. And you have to provide flexibility for them to manage their work and life and those demands between them. You will be amazed how much people will give back to you and be supportive of you if you just give them a little bit of the flexibility that you wanted for yourself. Trust but verify. We are in an industry, cybersecurity. You have to believe that that the controls and the regulatory requirements are going to continue to increase. Don't just assume people are doing what they're supposed to be. If there's a control procedure or a standard, make sure you know how people are complying with it. So that's a really key area, especially in financial services, right? So the regulators are in here all the time, and they want to verify that we are doing what we said we would be. So you need to stay on top of that for yourselves. Encourage your teams to raise concerns quickly. The one thing that will get you into a lot of trouble is if you brush problems under the rug or you close your eyes to them because you don't want to acknowledge them. As my boss now says to me, right, it's okay if you're going to miss dates, but you got to give me a heads up so that I can prepare everybody else to know that we're going to miss the delivery. If you wait until the last minute and you're late on closing an issue or action plan, it can cause a lot of damage. So you have to be very proactive in having those conversations. And concerns are a good thing. We learn a ton from where we make mistakes or have misses. So don't hesitate to do that. I think as, leaders, and there's a big difference between managers and leaders. Managers manage and leaders really lead. And so it's really important for you to ask people what they need and what they want to be successful. People make assumptions and they're not always right. And organizations, how you move forward and how you take on more responsibility and how you have greater impact can vary. And a lot of times the teams don't really have clarity around that. And so to me, that's something, that you need to do, is to really help people. The more successful they are, the more successful you'll be, which really ties into the next one, which is know your strengths. A long time ago, we are not all good at everything. And a long time ago, I did an exercise. There's a book out there. It's called Discover Your Strengths. And what they recommend there is leverage those and then staff to overcome your weaknesses. Not everybody is good at everything. If you don't like the detailed analytics, hire people that you trust that can do all of that detailed analysis for you so that you can spend time doing the other things that you feel are more useful. If you want to be doing the client interactions and talking about the value of tabletop exercises or how you solve breaches or how you close vulnerabilities, make sure you've got the right data and facts with you from somebody who's really good at digging into them. Be present. A lot of people you'll see, they're not paying attention. They're not focused in on calls. And that leaves a mark. I mean, that might be somebody's first impression of you. And so it's really, really important for you to be present and be approachable. I've talked to the teams as I travel the globe, and I'm like, look, a smile is worth a lot. If you have a smile on your face, people will come up. They will not be afraid to talk to you. They will not be afraid to raise their concerns to you. So that to me is really important. Another one that I would tell you is you have to be aware. Whether you realize it or not, you are being tested and you are being watched. And it doesn't matter from the time you walk in to how you carry yourself. If you get out of a meeting, they're going to try to read the tone of the meeting by your mood, by the way you walk, how heavy you stomp your feet. So just be really cautious and conscientious to know that, when we say in cyber Big Brother's watching, guess what? Your peers are all watching. Your management team is watching. So just something for you to think through. Give back. Your whole career, it's not just about you. It's about giving back to others, pulling others forward, giving back to your community. Be a mentor, be a coach, be a sponsor. To me, that's really, really key. And it's very, very fulfilling. And I think that's really important. I talked a little bit about being a continuous learner before, and to me, I feel like I can't tell people to go do that and not do that myself. And that's why going on for continuing education has always been very, very important to me. A lot of people are after certifications these days, cloud certifications or getting additional education and training. Make sure you keep it current, right? I mean, what's really interesting is positions that children are studying in college today, by the time those kids graduate, their knowledge is obsolete. So really, really focus in on being a continuous learner and a continuous reader. It's interesting how many people who are senior executives read every day. It's really tough to keep up with everything. And so that's on us. That's on each one of us to make sure we do that. Another one, learn to delegate. You have to build your own successor. You will never move on to that next role if you haven't thought about who your backfill is going to be and what you need to do to get them up to speed, to walk in your shoes and to lead behind you. And so to me, that's really key. Be appreciative. It's not about you taking all the credit. Give the credit to your team. Your team will then be there for you. They will acknowledge and recognize that you are bringing them with you and that you did not do this on your own. And to me, that's really another, key piece. I don't think that any of us ever say thank you often enough. And to me, that's a really, really, really important piece. We all want to be recognized. We all want to hear thank you. So make sure that you mirror that. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the other insights that I have gleaned over time for us as women in cybersecurity. Really important, like I just kind of mentioned, your next role may not exist yet because we hadn't thought about it. We didn't know that was going to be a requirement or a need. And I think that it's really important to look to see where might that next opportunity come from. And if we take a look at how people are reacting, I mean, it's interesting. people who have mathematics degrees are fabulous at forensics, but nobody thought, like, what am I going to do with a math degree? That they would be able to use it for like forensics analysis in some cases. Same thing, obviously, with criminal justice. So really interesting that the roles may not be out there yet, and there's no reason why you can't go define a new one. So challenge yourself with that. Definitely fight complacency. If you get too comfortable, then, the world can easily pass you by. Cyber is a very fast moving space. And it is really hard to stay abreast of all of the different dimensions. And it doesn't matter if it's, privacy legislations, records retention requirements, encryption requirements, password complexity, passwordless complexity, new, threat attack vectors. There's so much there. Don't get too comfortable. Another big one for me, take on the mess. It's going to create opportunities. So a lot of people run away from where they see stuff is broken. If they know there's been a breach, they don't want to go anywhere near that. Well, that's where you're going to learn the most. It creates massive opportunities, networking, and anybody in cyber, the best experience you can get is to having had to work on a specific breach. It really, there's lessons that you glean there. There's risks that you then become very well aware of. You understand financial ramifications. You understand what the legal teams are going to be looking for. So if you have opportunities to go, kind of run to the fire in my nomenclature, right? Go for it. And part of that is if you don't get a little agita in your stomach before you take that next job, like, I don't know if I'm ready. And people are telling you, yeah, you are, go. They trust you. They see that capability. So take advantage of it. I talked about this a little bit, but definitely stay current with new technology. It's interesting. If you just take a look at the Log4j, that stuff's been out there forever. It's amazing that vulnerability didn't get exploited much sooner. So it's really important. Understand technology, understand, where it's going, understand why some points you may say, you want to stay on, maybe something legacy, i.e. mainframe. It's very, very secure. It's interesting that a lot of the cyber incidents, they're all the exact same stuff that's been happening forever. Patch management, which is crazy. Holes in the firewalls. So, just because you're deploying new technology, if you don't do the regular old required hygiene, that new technology is not going to save you. Pull others forward and don't be afraid to ask for help. This is something that, in my opinion, men do extremely well. Right? They can fight in a meeting and have a tough time, but then they're going to make sure that they take care of that colleague. That they will not be afraid to ask for help. I think for us as females, we tend to feel if we ask for help, it's showing a vulnerability. And so, we don't have all the answers. And it's okay to say, hey, I don't know. Help me find out. I think that's really, really key. And before I open it up for some questions, I wanted to really highlight something that I think is really important. Again, industry is not as big as some people think it is, right? Get your name out there. Submit papers. Speak on panels. Attend conferences. Network. That creates huge opportunities for you. Write a white paper. To me, it's hugely beneficial. And once you become known as an industry expert or SME, it creates a lot of opportunities. And I think sometimes people wait too long in their career to even think about doing this. So do it for yourself. Nobody else is going to do that for you. So to me, that's really, really important. I want to go ahead and open it up for some questions. I've been speaking a little bit here, and this time is really for all of you. There is an opportunity to ask questions in the webinar chat, so I'll pull them right from there if anybody has any. So I'm seeing one come up that I mentioned staying current with new technology. Are there any publications or podcasts that I frequently go to? So thanks, Kristen. Good question. I usually don't necessarily go to a specific publication. I tend to read the news media and daily, right, just to see, and I'll take a look at at the tech news specifically. I don't. There's not as much new tech, like we, as you are well aware, right, at most companies, what ends up tending to happen is like, here's the technology that we're going with, so here's what we want you to focus in on. So, I mean, obviously, I think it's imperative for all of us to understand cloud. I don't care if it's Azure, AWS, or Google. So I think that that's a piece of it. Obviously, most of you have heard a ton of conversation around ChatGPT, Google's chat. And so I think a lot of those are key areas. And there is a lot of conversation around how this is going to change, quote, the world. One of the best things that I'm able to do is one of the board of directors that I'm on. It is a company that supports startups. And so part of them are fintech startups, healthcare startups, and cyber tech startups. So I stay very close to those teams, listening to where they're developing new tools and applications to solve other real world problems. And so I get a ton from where those teams are heading. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's where I tend to go most frequently. Let me just see, there was a response to that. You're welcome. So Susan, what are some things you consider strategies before making critical decisions? Good question. I would tell you one of them, I think that's really key, and this has been a lot of conversation most recently. Who benefits? Before you make a decision, are you impacting the end user, your stakeholders, end user customers? And so really trying to understand what the value is, and is it worth the investment in time, effort, and energy to go after it, I think is really, really important. So I would say, know your audience, know the expectations. And I think it's really important. Do not overcommit and underdeliver. You will have a really hard time with that if that continues. These are kind of going in backwards order. On the question on what I said about asking for help, won't that still work against us, simply being a woman? Carolyn, I don't believe it does. And the reason being is that, it's important for us to know, again, our strengths. And if there's something that we're not as strong at, how you ask for that help, I think, is important. And so the one thing I think that when we tend to ask for help, it's late and we're emotional. Right. So if you just got news that that's not what I was looking for, what's wrong with you? You should have come to me for help. And then we get tears in our eyes. That's when we tend to blow up. So I think, and who you ask for help of, I think is important too. Leverage your peers. We need men as allies, right? We need, our cyber sisters as allies. Leverage people to say, am I on the right track? Touch point with somebody before you feel like you're at the 11th hour and the presentation or the delivery or the root cause analysis is due. I think we sometimes scare ourselves because we're afraid we're going to look weak or ignorant if we do ask for help. And I think actually people want to be needed and they want to contribute to you. So asking for that help, I think how you do it is going to be really important. Like, hey, I've got some ideas on this, but I'm not sure I'm going down the right path. What do you think? Right? Instead of saying, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. Like we can't belittle ourselves in how we ask for that help, I think is a key. What's the biggest mistake you see young women in the field make that can be avoided? Great question. I'll tell you what I've seen lately. And it's the comment that says, oh, I want a full remote, work from home job. I don't think people realize how career limiting that can be. When you get out there and you work in an office space, you have a chance to network with a lot of people. Reality is, I think hybrid working is fabulous, right? It gives everybody more flexibility. But if you're going to stay home within your four walls and people only ever know you from Zoom, you could walk by them 8,000 times in an airport, in a supermarket, at a conference, and you wouldn't know. So I would just tell you, I really personally believe get into an office or get to an opportunity to network with individuals whenever you can, as I feel like that's something that's hurting us. And women are not as good at pulling other women forward. So to me, it's a really important piece that folks should look at. Can I give an example how I pulled someone forward, which ties right in? Yes, I can. So I several times even when I left IBM as an example, and I came to JPMorgan, I saw an opportunity where very specifically I wanted to create. I needed better resiliency across my organization. So I opened an office in Argentina because we were too heavily concentrated in India. And so I reached back to an individual who used to work for me and said, I'm asking you to do a big thing, right? I want you to leave, IBM, where you're at now, and come work for me here and start up this office for me in Argentina, which was a big deal. I've pulled people forward in working across the technology center. I said, look, you're not well networked here. You need to get on, a work stream outside of your day job so people get a chance to learn who you are and know what you do. I've pulled people into diversity, equity, inclusion teams to get, again, more networking. And so some of that, again, I try to be impactful outside of their day job. Their immediate management chains tend to know them, but that can't be the only people that know you, because if that manager or that manager's manager leave, you have to start all over again. So to me, it's really important that you continue to build a broad network where you have broad impact. What are some suggestions to someone who is just graduating college and looking to get into the field with no experience? There's some really good programs, and I would tell you, WiCyS has an amazing apprenticeship program where you can do some testing. If you have common sense, you can work in cyber. It's interesting because most of us get a little bit threatened by it because of the science side, but all of us have IDs. All of us have passwords. All of us want to make sure our data is secure. So it's not hard conceptually. It's different if you want to, and it's funny. Part of being a good cyber person is thinking where bad guys might want to go, and they are crazy clever. I also think just being cognizant of how you manage your own data is really important. So something like just, Google yourself, Google your mother, Google your father. What do you find online? Then how do you help them, reduce that digital footprint so somebody cannot use that information against them? Are interesting ways to kind of get started. And then don't hesitate to take some additional classes or certifications. I think that those are key things to do. And definitely, WiCyS has some outstanding programs, especially to help new grads. So I would leverage that. Being a fresher, what projects can I work on? I think when it comes to project work, one of the most important things to do is to raise your hand and ask people, if they need help. I think that that's a key piece. And so there's projects really pretty much everywhere. And it doesn't matter if it's a church, a local church in your community. Do they need help? Does the town you're living in, they never have enough resources. It doesn't have to be big corporate America, but if you're able to do something, your church has money, your local hardware store or supermarket. And so sometimes just trying to say, hey, I want to put something together that I helped with. It could be a local radio station. Everybody can use help. Working on web pages. So there's a lot of things that can be done. And there's a lot of 501c3s that need help. Nonprofits desperately need help. And so it's a great place to, get engaged and give back. And they have tons of projects. And if you think about how much sensitive information nonprofits have on all of us, it's pretty key. Just in terms of trying to how do you make sure that the donations are managed appropriately and that there's not embezzlement, or that if there is, that you can track it down appropriately. So those would be some ideas that I would say. And again, it kind of ties a couple of my themes together around give back. Certifications. I always love talking about certifications. I think certifications are important. What certifications show is that you know how to learn. They do not say anything about your ability to apply what you've learned. So, And if, depending on the number of certifications that you get, then you need to keep them current, right? Through like CPEs or CPUs. And so to me, it's important to try and get a good sense of, will I use this? And will I use it for a month or a few years? I know a lot of people have been running around getting AWS certification, but they don't work in the cloud. So to me, then you're going to have to take it again, or you're going to have to repeat the class as, audited, because you're not using what you've taken. I think for those that go into CISSP, CISM, CIPP, those are very difficult certifications, and that's a year-long study process and not just a few weeks. And so it's important when you get those, keep them current. I think that that's really key. There's a lot of certifications on newer technology you can get, but they're harder to necessarily keep current. People are going to ask if you know Java or Python, PowerShell, or obviously AWS, but they're not always going to ask if you're certified or not. They would rather give you a test on how well you know the tooling or the development of a code, which will be a bigger thing. On a resume, it helps get your foot in the door. But again, if the certification was from a long time ago and it didn't stay current, and then it may not have as much significant long-term meaning. Would I have any advice on networking at conference? I'm always worried about what to talk about when I approach someone and whether they would ever be interested in talking to me. I love this. Carnegie Mellon, everybody should be interested in talking to you. And you know what it is? It's a lack of our own confidence. And a lot of us that are in cyber, we tend to be more introverted. And going to conferences and trying to talk to people is one of the hardest things to do because it's uncomfortable. And we have to be vulnerable when we go do that. But I would tell you, start with meet one person or two people. When you have a chance to have a breakfast, sit next to somebody you don't know and just kind of ask them about their job, a day in their life. How did they get started? What do they like to do? What's your role now? Just make it very conversational. And I think that it becomes easier. But conferences can be very intimidating. And it's, all of a sudden you walk into a room and there's thousands of people and, you can feel rather insignificant rather quickly. But you have to push outside of that and just find one or two people, right, and start talking. And then it gets easier for every table you then to go sit at. Luckily, I'm an extrovert, so it's not as hard. But I'll tell you, I've been doing this stuff a long time. It just gets tiring. But every time you walk into, a new organization or a new client, you got to learn how to have those same conversations. So kind of treat it a little bit of the same way. First time you meet somebody for the first time that, hey, this is my friend, Cathy, I'd like you to meet her. Well, you got to break into that conversation. So don't second guess your value. That person could learn a lot from you. And so they're probably as interested in talking to you as you are in potentially talking to them, which to me is a good thing. What's the future of IAM? How is blockchain and AI going to disrupt the field? What about self-sovereign identity? The future of IAM, I think it's really interesting. I think you're going to continue to see us become much more federated versus having a single solution for everything. I think you will see us definitively get passwordless at some point in the future. I think you will see us do much more end-to-end automated access provisioning, access reconciliation, revocation, certification. Identity access management needs to really almost become invisible, and we're not good at it. Individuals don't like having to sign in hundreds of times. We say we have single sign-on, but we really don't. And to me, blockchain, it's really, how do you get to the blockchain, right? Is it a single sign-on? Do we really feel that the biometrics are the securest way to go? Is it my retina? Is it my face? Is it my finger? So how we continue to do multi-factor authentication is going to continue to build out. From an AI perspective, I think what's really interesting with AI is it has to be responsible and socially acceptable AI. So people aren't going to trust AI to just, we trust Alexa a lot. And so people don't even think about how much Alexa listens to until she starts reciting it back to you, or you see the text come back on your phone on like some of the other stuff. So I think what you'll tend to find is people might be a little bit more guarded or protected when it comes to some of the AI technologies that are out there. It'll make life a lot easier for writing some of the code around AI, trying to do enhancements. I think those will get easier. And self-sovereign identity, Kitki, I don't really know. I haven't thought that much about the self-sovereign identity. We don't tend to, as consumers, we don't tend to be very good about appropriately managing our own individual identities today. We tend to worry about it more at a firm or a company level. And we tend to think through certain aspects of our identity different ways. So our healthcare information, it's interesting because there's a lot of conversation that says, hey, all the wearable devices, Fitbits, Nike, the Nike watches, the Apple watches, somebody's gathering all that data on all of us. What are they going to do with it? How do we protect it? We all sign the fine print that says, yeah, I understand your privacy policies. So the self-sovereign identity, I don't know. I would have to get back to you on that one. To me, it's a good question. I'm a strong believer in continuing education as well. I was wondering if the order you took, MBA, then Cyber Masters, would you recommend a similar order if you go back to do it again? I snagged my first IAM role this year, and I'm hoping to make myself vital to my organization and make the best next step. Yeah, Sky, I would tell you, my personal belief, and happy for anybody to fight me on it, right, is I am not a big fan of getting an MBA right after you finish your first 4 years of college. And the reason I say that is you barely managed yourself, right? Your finances, a mortgage, your credit cards, your student loans, right? So like MBAs are really good for learning how you run a business. And if you want to be a leader of an organization, if you want to understand, what does marketing really all about? What is business management, financial management? Like that's really, it helps you. The cybersecurity masters, if you really are interested in cyber, so it depends on what you want. If you want to become a broader business leader with a cyber focus, I would do an MBA and then a cyber degree. If you want to be more of an individual contributor and you want to stay very focused in cyber itself, then I would go straight to a cyber master's degree. The key to both of those is, most of any education that you get is all about the theory. And that it's really important that you get the application. I would tell you one thing that was outstanding about the MBA program that I took is that it was a combination of application and theory. And so I got my MBA from Fordham University, and we went to Ireland to study information technology. We went to Washington, D.C. to study copyright legislation. We went to Geneva to learn about the International Monetary Fund. We did a final residential in China to learn about emerging markets. So when you get immersed like that, and you have to learn it on the, in real time, it's extremely helpful. So I know not everybody gets an opportunity to do a program like that, but I tell you, that's where to me it really has some big, broad impact. If you want to get an MBA, you want to do it virtually because you want to get more well-rounded, go for it. But I would say, depending if you want to be an individual contributor or a manager, will differentiate which one you take first. I hope that helps. For career transition, would you recommend certifications or masters in cyber as the best pathway to enter into cyber? I would say, you can easily start with a certification. It's faster to get, takes less time. And if you, depending on the size firm you go to, that may be all that they require. Not every place requires a master's in cyber to get into cyber. And a master's in cyber is once you get a foot into cyber, it could be in any different, venue. I mean, I hire into entry-level roles, right, in my organization in identity access management, and I have them all the way up through, analysts, associates, vice presidents, executive directors, up. So there's a lot of different places you could go. And I think I think, master's degrees, again, if you want to lead cyber teams, and you want to become a diehard cyber expert, master's is a way to go. In my opinion, certifications are if you want to learn a skill, you want to learn it now, you want to get instituted in that lane. For the most part, if you've never done cyber, you want to really get deep into cyber. I would say CISSP would be better than just like any kind of individual tool certification. What advice do you have for a recent graduate who kept getting denied from jobs? Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. You're entering a very difficult market right now. And I would try to get a sense for part of the problem. Could be a couple fold. And I don't know how many of you guys are aware of this. All resumes, if you don't have the keywords that people are looking for on your resume, it doesn't even make it to human eyes to see. We use AI and ML, filter all that stuff out, right? So if you're looking at what is required from any specific industry you might want to be into, it's going to be important for you to have certain language on your resume to be able to even get that interview. And I think that that's key. So if you were to take a look, and I'll tell you, LinkedIn's got some great resources, and I think that would be a good place to start. I would also say for any recent graduates, I mentioned I purposely started at the bottom rung of the ladder because I wanted to learn how everything started, and I knew I could go anywhere I wanted to, right? Because I said the sky's the limit. So don't be afraid to go take an entry-level job and get your feet on the ground, because in most companies, if you perform well within a year, you move into another role. And so something like starting even at an entry level to really learn how things work and start building that network, to me, is better than sitting at home waiting for the perfect job, which may or may not come around. So hopefully that helps. What advice will you give to the career changers who are out of jobs for several years? I think that the world, actually, I would say this honestly, is a lot more tolerant of that now, right? Like women leaving to go raise families, or, and again, WiCyS has done a great job in helping people that, hey, I was a physical therapist before and I decided I wanted to change roles and become a cyber expert. They offer some wonderful programs to help with those transitions. And so I think a key thing is, those career changers, good for you. People ought to be happy to give you that opportunity. And I think it's important just for you to build up the skill set to have those conversations. And again, leveraging WiCyS for where they do those job changes and those skill opportunities. There's a lot of people who come out of military service that are able to get really good jobs in cyber as well. There's nurses that have come out who are able to get your jobs in cyber because they understand like the healthcare side of things. So figure out what your other experiences have brought to the table and how you can leverage those in your job search. Do not be afraid because you haven't spent your whole career in cyber. It's that the whole field is not that old, honestly. So to me, don't back away from it. Besides studying and writing papers, what are some examples of the types of projects you do to suggest for those who want to build additional experience in GRC and auditing? Since the roles for auditors tend to want people with prior audit experience and specific certifications, which also often require additional experience. It's interesting. The global risk and compliance roles, auditing roles, some good ways to do that. And I know like PwC is an example. Price Waterhouse does an awesome job training people in those types of roles because it's a massive piece of their consulting service, which is a good thing. And I think another good thing to do is kind of buddy up with somebody that you might know that's in one of those roles. They usually will take interns. I know even at JPMorgan Chase, we take interns into auditing. And so it might be an opportunity to look for an apprenticeship or an internship to get into those experiences. Or if you're in a firm and you want to learn how to do that, find out what kind of shadow programs they have so that you can go spend, a day in the life or a couple days or, a week or whatever with somebody who does that work, and then try and figure out from the manager what are the most important skills that you need. You can learn skills. Do you have the right, approach? Obviously behavior skills, but auditing is different. And we never have enough people, in my opinion, that want to get into audit and stay in audit. And so I think that definitely making that wish known is key. And I think talking to people and saying like, I want to get into auditing. I mean, I think that's a really important part. I don't know how well like accounting. So it really depends on if it's the GRC side. Have you done any work in privacy? Have you ever done any privacy auditing before? If you take a look on any of the regulatory requirements, have you ever looked at the SOC 1? They're always looking for SOC 1 testers, and that's a really good place to start to get into like GRC or auditing for financial services, as an example. HIPAA is another one, right? Learn more about the PCI. Learn more about the legislation and the regulations and the ISO standards around it, and then that's really all the basic information that you need to know where auditing is going to go look. So hopefully that helps. Can I speak to the impact of male allyship in navigating my career journey? How important is it to have support from men in executive leadership positions? It's critical. It's really, really critical. I would tell you what I have found in my career, and it's kind of ironic. Early in my career, I was working for men and women. What I found really interesting is the women were much more, I think they were harder on me. They had a really high bar, but they were always much, much better at, compensation recognition for a job well done, which was really interesting to me. Men as allies, I think it's critical because, if I take a look, like as an example at JPMorgan Chase, we're in technology, we're 28% women. If I'm not syncing up with my men as allies, I've lost, almost 70% of people who could help me in my career. So you are going to always have to work with men. You're going to always work with, transgenders, people you may not know, right? So to me, just look at what other people bring to the table. And if you get along with them or you like their style, you like their leadership capabilities, then tag up with them. Have the schedule, hey, I really liked how you handled that situation. Can I get 15 minutes with you, 30 minutes with you? Would you mind coaching me? Here's a problem I have. How would you approach it? I think that's really key. The other thing that you'll tend to find, men are excellent sponsors, even better than some of the women can be. Women can tend to sometimes be a little bit more judgmental. And if I do this for you, you're going to do this for me. And men are like, no, that's a rock star. Go get her. She's really, really good. So I would tell you, we all have pros and cons that we bring to the table. But to me, it's really important. You have to partner with the men and find ways that you can work best together. And again, it's really building what I called win-win solutions. To me, that's really key. The next question. What would your advice be to someone just starting in this space to land a job when the recs that are listed for the job may require more than the qualifications that we currently have? In your opinion, are companies going to start looking at hiring entry-level candidates with entry-level certifications? Yes. So this is another one which is really interesting. This question came from Brianna. Brianna, it's really funny. When there are any openings posted, almost zero candidates have all the qualifications. Women are very apprehensive to respond to it because they feel like, I might have 60 to 70% of the qualifications. Guys are like, I got this. And they always submit the resume. They always do. And then at least you get a foot in the door to have a conversation. You may not have everything. So when you respond back to that, and sometimes we have to customize our resumes for the job, highlight what you do have, right? Leverage your strengths, highlight what you do have. And you can then talk to what you may not have and say, I'm currently studying X, Y, or Z, or I'm in the process of learning more, or partnering on trying to find out, I'm getting some audit experience at the moment, whatever. So to me, it's important to really leverage what you bring to the table. And then, okay, so you don't have 10 years experience. Well, they just, and sometimes if you read a resume, it's written for men. Look at the language in it. And what they're asking for is for a unicorn, and nobody's going to have 10 years experience with this, at this, at this, at this, and they're going to pay you this. It doesn't work that way. So don't hesitate to throw your name in the hat. You want to at least be considered. And so, in those cases, if you have experience with any of the common tools that we all use and stuff, those are important. If you have any certifications, put them on there, right? To me, that's important. What are some unique opportunities women often encounter in the field of cyber? Unique opportunities. Well, I'll tell you, I would say there's a few things. There are organizations like this one, WiCyS, right? Specifically there to help us. There is no organization like this for men. There's organizations like Executive Women's Forum. There's a ton of conferences targeted at women. Grace Hopper, Women in Tech. I'm on the Women in Tech board of directors. So there's a lot of opportunities that we have that the men don't. And I'll tell you what, they're not happy about it. Where's my conference is what I hear from them. And so I would say for those of us, because we know there weren't enough women in cyber, that, we're getting a foot in the door. What's interesting, and some of you may not realize this, is the whole reason women got into software development was because of the war. The men were out defending, so people had to develop software. Well, the women started doing it. Women are actually really, really good developers. And the reason being is they are extremely detail oriented. And so their code works, right? When they submit a release to be deployed, it's perfect. Women tend to be more perfectionists. We test things. We want to ensure success because we shy away from failure. And so in the field of cyber, we'll get to the root cause. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again. When there's a breach, we dig and dig and dig to make sure we truly understand how everything was breached and how far it breached, and we don't just settle on the first thing that we find. So I would tell you, women in cyber are really good at it. And again, we have a lot of common sense. And so to me, I think that those are some things that really benefit us as women in cybersecurity. Are there any courses for international cyber law? Which are the emerging countries of job markets for cybersec job roles? So I would tell you international cyber law, most of the cyber master's degrees are going to cover some of it. Europe as a whole is probably one of the best places to understand cyber law. And it's interesting because it's how they deal, and it's not so much just cyber law, but it's privacy law. And so what you tend to see a lot, like, California was way ahead of the United States in terms of their privacy laws. How they manage personal information, like in Italy, is totally different from how they manage it in, like Argentina, as an example. And so I think if you wanted just to look at some unique differences, if you understand how they collect and manage personal information, it will give you insight into a lot of those aspects. I mean, the Basel legislation over for like the UK and other parts of Europe, very significantly leading edge, right? So our Sarbanes-Oxley legislation came out much later. But I would say understanding some of the international cyber law, ISO standards are universal, right? Which is one piece. China's still writing its cyber law. They, for some of this. So it's at varying degrees of maturity across the globe. I don't even think Brazil has much for cyber law yet. And so it's actually kind of interesting. For emerging countries for cyber, I would tell you Ukraine, right? I mean, this has been amazing what we've been watching there. I would also say some of our APAC countries. I don't know how many people are aware of the fact that, say, for example, in India, they've always done voice recordings, and they had to keep them for like call centers and stuff like that. So there's a lot of unique nuances. But where some of the strictest laws come in, it's really where there's the heaviest regulation. So the monetary authority of Singapore has very strict laws for the country of Singapore. The European Central Bank, very strict laws for how you run over in Europe. So there's a lot that goes on in the different spaces. Canada's not as strict as some of the United States countries. Mexico is just kind of getting involved in some of this. So it's kind of a little bit everywhere. And some of it is because of what tooling they may or may not have, including, any data leakage prevention and stuff. And so a lot of the cyber law is directly correlated to how secure the government is managed. So if you look where there's weaker governments, you're going to find that there's fewer cyber laws, if that helps. From my hiring experience, what keywords am I looking for in senior positions like a VP? For me personally, I think it's really important. I'm looking for somebody who's a strategic thinker, who's a self-starter, who takes full ownership and accountability, who likes challenges. And so as I read at what people are looking for, like in my mind, I can pretty much at a VP level, people have experience. And then I can pretty much train them to do anything, but I want the problem solver, somebody who's good at, data analysis, somebody that has good, communication and presentation skills, because I manage a global team. So to me, that's important. And then, any of my vice presidents, I look for them to want to be leaders. I want to make sure that this is not a journey just for them, but they're looking to bring other people forward and give back. So those are some of the key things that I look for many of the vice presidents that join my organization. My experience is in big corporations. Have I ever considered trying to work in fintech or startups where it's barely established? Interesting. So I helped my husband start 2 businesses. So I have some experience from that. But what I tended to find personally, and I help consult startups, and they've asked me to. I've had a couple of them actually asked me to be on their board of directors for advice and guidance. And so I've kind of gotten a little feel from that startup view there. But I think I've just gravitated towards bigger, larger, uglier problems faster, if that makes sense. I think that in my career, I've managed large call centers. I've managed privacy. I've done massive information technology transformations. So since 2001, I guess 2011. I really got into cyber. So I've enjoyed the identity access management space, and the piece of that I've tended to like the best, which has been kind of my niche, is addressing malicious insider threat. And so when you're working with a small startup that has like 10 people, there's not much opportunity for me to really go dig at it, which is why I haven't really spent a ton of my personal career time in that space, if that helps. But again, for me, I like that insider threat thing. How do I make sure these people aren't being bad guys? Because these are the ones we trust. These are the ones we've given the education, the training, the user ID, the password. What are they going to do with it? So it's a little bit different. Would we put our currently studying selection on our resume, or let the recruiter for that role know that? Yeah, I would put it on, right? Like if you're anything you're studying that you want to highlight, feel free, put it on your resume. What would be your advice for national students trying to break into cybersecurity? Asking this because many companies require you to be U.S. citizens because of clearance. True. And I know a lot of U.S. companies, they're not as free-flowing with H-1 visas as they used to be either. Security clearance you can get over time. And I think sometimes if you get into the company, if you get into a company before you get into that first cyber role, it's easier. I know we have something that we call high risk role security clearance that you have to have if you come into the division that I'm part of here. But you have to get that even if you go from working in the commercial investment bank and you want to come over into the cyber team, you have to go through some of those clearances. That is harder. But I would say, depending on the firm, you could try, until you could actually receive any U.S. citizenship or a green card. You could try where they don't have to have that same level. If you really understand some of the business side, and then you start talking through where you see some cyber gaps, it would be another way to kind of go at it, kind of around Robin, if that helps. I think I covered most of the questions. So how am I doing on time? Oh my goodness, it's like a minute left. So thank you everybody for the questions, and I really appreciate the conversation. A big call out to WiCyS and my colleague Kristen Wenzel, and also to WiCyS for Laura for all of the help in setting this up. I did include on the very first page my email. It's Cathy.Ryan.Reneer@JPMorgan.com. So if any of you have any other questions, feel free to reach out. I'm also on LinkedIn. Thank you for your time and your questions and your attention. I hope it was helpful. Have a great day. Thank you.